Now, live with Greg Olson, Director of the New York State Office for the Aging.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Olson, and I'm the Director of the New York State Office for Aging. First of all, welcome back. It's been a while since the summer, and I haven't had a show. So I hope you guys all had a safe and happy summer. The weather was, I can't remember the weather being as nice as it was this summer. So we're glad to be back. You know, we've probably to date have done close to 100 programs going back to 2020. And all of them are really important. And we try to pick topics that, you know, based on talking to older adults, talking to the people that we work with, things that you pick up, just again, interacting with folks around the state are going to be meaningful to them. This one is one of the most consequential. There's no question about this. And it's something that we do every September. September is Sepsis Awareness Month. And just the time that it's going to take me to introduce this segment, unfortunately, one person is going to die from sepsis. By the time we finish in about an hour, 40 people will die from sepsis. This has always been an important topic, but given some of the recent changes at the federal level, especially concerning the almost $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, that is really going to have an impact in limiting people's access to hospitals, to emergency responders, potentially transportation, the number of physicians, licensed practical nurses, nurses in general. So, like I said, it's always been important, but it's so much more important now. And we're moving into the funding bills that fund agencies like ours, which could further erode the impact of being able to help people if they have sepsis. So we're really excited to have this show today. Older adults are the most at risk, but this is an equal opportunity killer that affects people of all ages. In fact, sepsis claims the lives of more children than cancer, 18 children every single day. So this is a birth to death issue, absolutely. And understanding what it is and how to identify it is, and get treatment, certainly, and prevent it is what this is all about. So the information that we're going to provide today, like I said, is for anyone, individuals of any age, parents, teachers, caregivers, families. But if any of you work for an organization, getting the information out is not a heavy lift. It's a simple click of the button to your networks, to your social media. We're going to share the basic facts about sepsis to help you save a life. Could be one of yours, could be your family's. But we're also going to talk about ways that organizations and individuals can get engaged in sepsis awareness, because it is so important. I have two amazing people with me today that have dedicated their lives to this issue. First, I want to introduce Tom Heyman. He's the president and CEO of the Sepsis Alliance. Tom has led Sepsis Alliance to consecutive years of growth, including the organization's drive to increase sepsis awareness. And he's been an incredible NYSOFA partner in our allied work to raise sepsis awareness among aging service providers and the public, and the creation of what we call the Partnership for Sepsis and Aging. I also am so honored to have with us Rory Staunton, and she's the founding director at End Sepsis, the Legacy of Rory Staunton. She and her husband, Sirian, founded the organization in 2012 following the undiagnosed, untreated, and preventable death of their 12-year-old son, Rory, from sepsis. We'll hear Rory's story later in the broadcast and work with the two of them on how you can be involved. It's so very important. Questions for our guests, please put them in the chat so we can get to them later. We're also going into a season where some of the signs and symptoms, which will be talked about today, can mirror other things. Most people think we're beyond the COVID pandemic. We're not. COVID surges every fall, and it's doing that right now. We're going into flu season. We also have RSV. And oftentimes they can be misconstrued, and it could be sepsis, it could be something else, but some of the signs and symptoms are the same. So Tom, let me start with you, because I was one of these people. Probably 5 years ago, I had heard the word sepsis, but I really didn't know what it was. So for those people like me, and I think that there's a lot of them out there, tell us what it is exactly.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, and thank you for having us on during Sepsis Awareness Month. I really appreciate the opportunity. And so sepsis is very often misunderstood or misdescribed as a really bad infection, or sometimes called blood poisoning. Sepsis is not an infection, but it does rely on an infection. Your body's often deadly response to an infection. So a way we like to describe it that really seems to break through is it's like a bee sting. When you get stung by a bee, it certainly hurts, but you don't have a problem. You don't have a medical problem unless your body has that anaphylactic reaction to the bee sting. Similarly with sepsis, you need an infection, and that could be a bacterial infection, a viral infection like COVID or the flu, a parasitic infection, tick bites, or a fungal infection, more and more common now, that then instigates a cascade of sepsis, which is your body's immune response to that infection, which often causes organ failure, and which really shuts your organs down. And that's where you really run into problems. And as Greg said, it can affect anyone. It is disproportionately harmful and problematic for very young children whose immune systems are not developed yet. Older folks, unfortunately, whose immune systems are starting to weaken, and folks who are on immune suppressing drugs like cancer patients, or folks who have a chronic condition that might suppress their immune systems. But know that this can affect anyone, and you'll hear stories today. Our organization was founded by a dad who lost his daughter, 23 years of age, perfectly healthy. He had never heard of sepsis before. And at that point in time, only 19% of the country had heard the word before. So this work is really, really important. It's common. 1.7 million cases a year, 350,000 perish. So leading cause of death, the number one cause of death in hospitals, and much, much more.
Yeah, and if, again, the whole purpose today, because you're going to get into the stats after this next question, because that is how I got involved. It is just stunning. And to know that there are ways to prevent it, right, but also to identify it. And the fact that a lot of people don't know anything about this. And when they hear the stats, I hope that they have the same reaction that I did. Like, wow, it's not a heavy lift to try to educate people on what the signs and symptoms are. And if we're not doing that, we are really placing ourselves and our families and people that we know at risk. So can you talk about the signs and symptoms of sepsis, and how is it treated?
Yeah, so we've developed a mnemonic, like stroke has FAST. We've developed TIME, which are the most common symptoms. T is for a temperature high, or even more problematically low. A low temperature we found is even more of an indicator that someone is potentially very ill. I is for a sign of an infection. That could be painful urination. It could be an obvious cut that's not healing well. It could be a dental abscess, a urinary tract infection, a kidney stone. M is for mental status change. We hear this very, very often. Uncle Joe just wasn't himself, or Zach he wasn't making sense. And at that point, we knew something was wrong. And the E is for extreme pain. We often hear people say, I've never felt so sick in my life. I thought I was going to die. So these are the most common symptoms that should be a signal that something is going on here. And like stroke or heart attack, sepsis is a medical emergency. It can't wait until Tuesday when the doctor can see you. If you see or experiencing these symptoms, you need to get to medical care urgently.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, especially, again, all times during the year. But as we're moving into September, October, November, December, as you said, if this isn't identified early, it could literally be too late. Alex, can you pull up, because time is a really great way, if you speak English, to have an acronym about some of the signs and symptoms. But we have in 12 different languages provided additional signs and symptoms, so that regardless of what community you are in New York State, we can get these resources out. Because as I mentioned, it's literally can be an email, it can be in a newsletter, it can be on LinkedIn, it can be on Facebook, social media, it could be handed out at health clinics, or anywhere people congregate, a senior center, and a home delivered meal packet. It's very, very easy. So it's a one pager, both Tom's and ours, in English and multiple other languages, again, to help save people's lives. Now, Tom, you know this about me because we've been working together for a while. The data just leaps off the page, and the data are human beings. So can you walk us through some of the data that you want to share in terms of sepsis impact on people, on health spending, or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, it's really alarming. It is the number one cost of hospital care in this country. I know we have an administration that's concerned about spending. Number one cost of hospital care. Number one reason for people dying in hospital. Fully 1 in 3 people who die in a hospital is related to sepsis. 1 in 3. It is the number one cause for readmission. So 2 out of 5 of survivors, so we're talking about 1.3 million survivors every year who leave the hospital, 2 in 5 are back in the hospital within 90 days. It is the number 2 cause of maternal mortality in this country, and it is the cause of death greater than cancer for our young people.
Yeah, and if you go to Sepsis Alliance website or the Partnership for Sepsis and Aging, you can get 3 pages worth of devastating statistics that if we just work together, hopefully we could bend that curve a little bit. Now, Tom, us as a society, we're not very good at proactive anything. We're really good at reactive. We wait for something to happen that's bad and then try to treat it. Is sepsis preventable?
Yeah, sepsis is preventable in most cases. We have our new tagline is infection prevention is sepsis prevention. So if you don't get an infection, you can't get sepsis. So how do you keep from getting an infection? Well, the obvious answers are vaccinations. Vaccinations for flu. We very often, most people who die of flu die of sepsis, and that may not be widely understood. So if you can prevent flu from happening, particularly if you're an immunocompromised patient, you can prevent sepsis from ever being a possibility. So we know that infections will happen. So the key then is to make sure that we are washing our hands, we're paying attention to any open cuts or wounds. Very recently, there have been stories about people letting their pets lick their cuts. Not a good idea. Going into open waters that may be polluted, not a good idea anymore. These are all things that we can do. If you are taking antibiotics, make sure you complete the course of antibiotics. There are a lot of things that we can do to prevent infections, prevent sepsis. And if we do think something is happening, that we seek care quickly. We don't try to tough it out. Too many stories of people delaying care. And we know that mortality, risk of death can go up by as much as 8% every hour the treatment is delayed. So think of this like stroke or heart attack. This is something that is a medical emergency. You got to call for the first responders or get your folks to a doc or the emergency department immediately.
And Orly, it's an honor to have you on here. I've heard your story. It's hard to listen to as a parent or anybody that deals with this type of thing in their family. And you and your husband have really dedicated your lives to do what we're trying to do today because of your personal story. And I hate to ask you to do this, but I think it is so powerful because as we're talking about the impact on older adults, this is not an older adult issue. This is a family issue regardless of age. But if you wouldn't mind just sharing your story and how you got involved.
Sure. Well, thank you, Greg, for having me on. Alex, if you wanted to put up the first slide, that would be good. It's first slide, sorry. That's it, Alex. So I'm the mom of Rory Staunton, and Rory died at 12 years of age from sepsis. Rory was a wonderful kid. He was a big kid. He was 12, but he was 5'9", 160 pounds, always smiling, always wanting to get involved in issues, and sent him off to school one Wednesday, late March in 2012. And he came home that evening and he told us he'd fallen in the gym and he was playing basketball and went for the ball, got the ball, but he had scraped his elbow and he had Band-Aids on his elbow. And he said the gym teacher had placed the Band-Aids on the elbow. And then later that night, early hours of the morning, actually, I heard him throwing up in the bathroom and I went in and he said to me, "Mom, it's my leg, my leg, my leg." And so I brought him back to bed, massaged his leg, fell back asleep. And then the following morning, he had a very high temperature and we began calling our pediatrician. we kept our eye on him all day, and then that evening we brought him in to see the pediatrician, and she gave us she examined him completely. She listed everything, and she gave us a diagnosis of gastric flu, which she said was going around New York, everywhere. And she suggested we bring him to a major New York hospital, which was very close to our office, just to have him rehydrated because he hadn't drank much fluid. So we did that, and they proceeded to examine him again, to list his vital signs, and they gave him some fluids and sent him home. The following day, Rory got worse, and he was lying on the couch and wasn't moving and wasn't talking, was just very, very quiet. And we were calling our pediatrician, telling her, listen, nothing's happening. What should we do? And that evening, his nose began to turn blue, and we raced back into the hospital with him. And, you know, all hell broke loose in there when we went back with him. And he was taken to intensive care, and that was Friday evening, and he died there on Sunday night. And it was like just like your absolute nightmare. I couldn't believe that my son was healthy on Wednesday and was dead on Sunday, and he had no underlying conditions. But when he went to his pediatrician, he actually was showing all the signs of septic shock, based on what she had written down. His temperature, he was tachycardy, he had little red veins on his legs, and he had asked her, "Why is my leg sore?" And she said, "It's the fall." And he said, "No, it's not the fall, because I didn't hurt my leg in the fall." And I had asked the pediatrician, "Was there anything I have to worry about here? Is there anything I really need to worry about?" And she said no. And what we subsequently found out when we was brought to the hospital, that they took blood tests, and the blood tests showed that they were ordered stat, which was urgent. They were never read. And he was sent home, and the blood tests had actually come back, were actually back by the time he left the hospital, and it showed that he was fighting a severe infection. So we were left really we just couldn't believe it, that all these symptoms added up to something that we knew nothing about. And, you know, I stripped him down on the Friday, which is a hard thing to do with a 12-year-old boy. And I said, "Rory, I know you're not well. I don't know what it is, but I have to see if there's something, if there's a tick bite, if there's something that they didn't see last night." And I couldn't find anything except the scrape of his elbow. And so he died on us on a Sunday night. And, you know, quite frankly, our life it's just never been the same, and never will be.
Give me a second. Thank you for sharing the story. I don't think anybody can imagine what you guys have been through, what it's been like since. But you turned a tragedy into something to help other people. End sepsis, the legacy of Rory Staunton. And the legacy part is really, really important. And you guys have accomplished so much. Can you talk about some of the things that you've been able to accomplish due to this tragedy?
Sure. I think, yeah, we didn't know. We were just so confused after he died. And we began asking questions, and we discovered, because nobody mentioned sepsis to us when he was in the hospital, we discovered he died from sepsis. And we were like, what is that? What is sepsis? And none of our friends knew, none of our family knew, nobody knew what sepsis actually was. So we decided to do something about it, and we decided to tell our story, and we told our story to everybody who would listen. And so the New York Times covered it, and several other major publications covered it. But we didn't really think that was enough. We felt that we knew that some hospitals, Rory might have figured better if we had brought him to one hospital and not the other hospital. And let me tell you, you know, when your child dies, you're just consumed with guilt. Like, what could I have done? What could I have done? So we said we have to do something to change this. It has to be a case that if you go to a hospital wherever in New York State, they will treat you the same way if you come in with sepsis symptoms. So the Commissioner for Health at New York State was Nirav Shah at the time. And we found the New York State Department of Health to be so good and so comforting and so interested in making sure that this didn't happen again. So working with the hospitals and with us, they came up with Rory's regulations, which are a set of protocols that every hospital in New York State must follow. They are basically, they're a standard of care. So when you show up at the hospital, you must be treated this way. And then tied into that is also an accountability factor. If your numbers are high in terms of deaths, you will be asked, you know, you could be asked what happened. So Rory's regulations became law in 2013, and we know that they have been very successful. We know we saved 16,000 lives within 2 years. And they were the first laws of its type in the US. And also, you know, they were kind of an example of what other states could do, and how you know, other states could take the key elements of Rory's regulations and bring them into their state. So we are happy to say that several other states have actually laws passed based on Rory's regulations. So we know that thousands of lives were saved, and we also know that something broke down when we were in the emergency room that night, and that was communication. And, you know, I remember being there kind of giving an eye to the doctor, sort of, is he okay? You know, waiting for her to nod back to me, that kind of stuff. And we weren't communicated with in a proper way. They never checked the blood tests. They never came back to us on any of that. So we, at the time of Rory's regulations, we also, New York State also introduced a patient's bill of rights, and essentially that's it really is mandating communication to talk to the parents about what blood tests have been ordered, and also what their diagnosis is and what their secondary diagnosis might be. So we got that through, and we're very, very happy. And we now know that Rory's regulations was the basis for regulations in New Jersey, Rhode Island, Indiana, Illinois. And so we can see the impact it's having. Then in 2013, my husband was very involved in immigration, federal work at the time. And he started knocking doors basically in the Senate, and we got them to agree to a hearing. And that was in 2013. And that was the first time a CDC and a patient advocate group were actually sitting at the same table. Then we thought, well, what else could we do? You know, I felt that if Rory had known about sepsis, or our daughter Kathleen, we would have been chatting about it like they used to tell us to put our garbage in the right place, that kind of stuff. And so we approached AFT, and AFT and ourselves came together with and produced an education module which covers infection from, you know, classes or courses from kindergarten through to 12th grade, with the 12th grade class being about, you know, be a good advocate. So that was introduced in 2015. And then we realized, you know, it started coming out a little bit more about maternal sepsis. And then, so we started working in that area. And with the help of the federal government, we were able, with New York State Department of Health again, to actually produce a survey of data on who was actually getting sick. Well, was there a specific age group that was getting sepsis when they were pregnant, after they had their baby? Was there a particular group, you know, in terms of your ethnic background? And then the other area that we really wanted we went head on was just CDC, because we always felt they were meant to protect us, basically. And when we went online, there was nothing on their index for sepsis, absolutely nothing. So we started knocking their door, and that was a tough door to open. But when they opened it, they did put sepsis on their A to Z index, and they started working on it. And then we kind of fast forward to federal level, and we in 2022, with the first time ever, we got money with the help of Senator Schumer from New York. Also, we got finance in the national budget for sepsis, and that money went directly to AHRQ to produce a congressional report on sepsis, and also to CMS and CDC, so they would work together to come up with better pediatric guidelines and better, and better outcome measures. So we've increased that money as we've gone along, and this year we got $3 million into the budget, and then the other main thing that happened last year, at the end of last year, was that the White House had a patient safety day, which we had lobbied them to do, and we were actually asked to give the opening address for that. So we feel we've made a lot of progress. We'll never bring Rory back. We'll never bring the other children and the other adults that have died back, but we fight on, and that's all we can do. We can never bring him back, and that's the pain we live with every day. But we would really love to stop other people dying, and we were just stunned that it kills so many people from right across the board in age groups. So we're just trying to make a difference.
Well, you are making a difference, and it's amazing accomplishments. And being able to channel that grief into action. For anybody out there that thinks that their voice doesn't matter or they can't make change, I think we just learned that you absolutely can. So before we go to break, I'm going to ask you both of this question. Why do you think this is so misunderstood? You guys have been doing this a long time. We got involved, 5 years or so ago. But what are we not doing to make this issue a household name?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it's across the board. I mean, our organization is structured in 4 pillars, and to address what we believe are the key challenges. And the first pillar is public education. Most sepsis cases start in the community, like Rory's. 87% of cases are present on admission. So we need to make sure that the public knows about this the way they know about stroke or heart attack. And we're well on our way. We've gone from 19% awareness to 69% awareness. We track that every year. There are huge disparities between ethnic groups and income groups and age and things like that we still need to address, but we're moving in the right direction. We also need to make sure that our healthcare professionals have this on the radar. Obviously the ball gets dropped a lot of times, and the weakest link creates the challenge. And very often it's, an untrained, uninformed healthcare professional, whether it be a school nurse or OBGYN or oncologist or first responder or an ED nurse or doc or urgent care, wherever that may happen. And so what we're doing is we've created a training institute for healthcare professionals across the continuum of care. We're at 65,000 trained already, growing at about 1,000 a month. And we offer free continuing nursing education and now free continuing medical education. We've just been accredited. So, our goal is to make sure every healthcare professional who we go to see or call, whether it's a home health aide or whatever, that they know about sepsis the way they know about stroke. And that has to be the bar that we're going.
I think just to add to what Tom says, just in terms of the general public, I think that sepsis was a very difficult term to get people to sort of catch on to. People were like, "Oh, what is that?" And it just didn't work. And the other thing that we found was that when we got Rory's death started, it didn't say sepsis on it. It said complications from. So families don't really know that their loved one has died actually from septic shock. And I think that in addition to what Tom has been saying, is definitely is something we have to work on and, make sure that term is out there and people know what it is and simplify the language when we're talking about it. There's nothing as difficult, I think, as someone trying to explain sepsis in medical terms. It's like, whoa, so simplify it. And I think both our organizations have done a good job at doing that.
Yeah, I think you guys have done an amazing job. I appreciate you both. We're going to take a quick break. If you're just joining us, this is Sepsis Awareness Month. And, I don't beg too often, but there's resources here that can literally save your or one of your family members' lives. There's so much that both End Sepsis and the Sepsis Alliance offer for the general public, as well as for professionals. And I know, Tom, from the Sepsis Alliance, you were talking earlier about some of the additional new outreach that you've been doing. So what we'd like to do is show this public service announcement that you guys put out to help kids learn about staying sepsis safe.
Hi, I'm Bug, and I'll help keep you safe from sepsis. Sepsis can happen to your body after you get an infection, like if you get a cut and don't keep it clean, or you touch a sore, scab, or bite with your hands. These can get infected. Or what if you ignore a really bad cough? If you let too much time go by, your body can respond dangerously to the infection. That's sepsis. So when you get hurt or feel real sick, tell a grown-up. React fast, and together we can keep sepsis safe.
So, Tom, I think one of the things that really struck me is when I first had heard about sepsis, the origins of where sepsis come from, I thought would be in a hospital, in an emergency room, etc. But where do the most cases of sepsis originate from?
Yeah, the vast majority start in the community. 87% start in community. So that's really important, particularly for an older population, where we have, older folks, including in my family, of a revolving door of UTIs, require, 911, hospitalization, treatment, home, rinse and repeat. So it's a real problem in the community. So that early identification can often prevent the need for hospitalizations, saving money and resources and pain and suffering for the family. But the ones that start in hospital are very, very important. 13% of a very big denominator, 1.7 million cases, is a lot of healthcare associated infections. And that is, in fact, how Carl Flatley lost his daughter, Erin. It was the result of a healthcare associated infection during what should have been a routine outpatient surgery. And they didn't prescribe antibiotics. They had no follow-up care, no transitional care. And it was a result of a healthcare associated infection from a minor surgery. So, and, very often the healthcare associated infections are more serious because someone is already in the hospital in many cases for something else. So they're already in a compromised condition. So we have to keep an eye on those. But I think the real opportunity for us is upstream, prevention, early diagnosis, treatment, public education, provider education in urgent care, which is now our primary point of care, first responders, skilled nursing facility staff, home health aides, all of these folks, school nurses can pick this up. We hear those stories more and more often, really making this as well known as stroke.
And Tom, you talked about this being a medical emergency. We talked about the signs and symptoms. We have the 12 different languages. What does somebody do if they suspect, based on those symptoms, that they have sepsis? What do they do?
Yeah, what you got to do is you got to act quickly. And if someone is really demonstrating those symptoms, you got to either call 911 or get them to the hospital. And ideally, they're with an advocate. And the important thing is you can't count on the healthcare professional to have sepsis on their radar, whether they're just not clued in or they're too busy. So it's very important to say, could this be sepsis? And then we hear it all the time. Things change dramatically once you put it in their mindset, in their differential diagnosis, that it becomes the first thing they consider, given how common this is. So it's up to us as a community, as patients, family members, and healthcare professionals to do a better job on this. And some 80% of these cases could have been prevented.
Yeah, I think a real life story. I had sent out, this is years ago when I'd first gotten the time and the signs and symptoms. I'd sent it out to my staff on a Friday morning, and Tuesday morning, one of my employees came up and said, I had gotten the email with the PDF attachment, right? Simple click of the button and send. Wound up in the emergency room Saturday morning. Had to tell the physician, I think I have sepsis. Sure enough, she did, and said, that signs and symptoms you sent out Friday morning saved my life. So to your point, now, Orla, you talked so much about all the things that you guys have been able to accomplish, but there's more in terms of your legislative advocacy. There's now a bill in Congress called the Sepsis Act. Tell us what that is.
Sure. We have a bipartisan bill that was introduced to the Senate first introduced in September 13, 2024, and then we reintroduced it again in June 2025. The Sepsis Bill, Sepsis Act, it stands for Securing Enhanced Programs, Systems, and Initiatives for Sepsis. So this was co-sponsored by, again, Senator Chuck Schumer and also Senator Collins from Maine and Senator Andy Kim from New Jersey. And it is an act that really follows up really on Rory's regulations. The intent of it is to increase early recognition and treatment of sepsis. I don't want to go into all the details on it, but essentially the CDC last year produced core elements of care for sepsis, which we have been waiting for a long time, because we had core elements of care for antibiotic resistance, and we were always trying to get sepsis to be treated the same as antibiotic resistance. So the decision was made by CDC to introduce these core elements for care for sepsis. So what this act does, it supports their work in terms of monitoring what the hospitals are doing for sepsis. It shows them how sepsis should be treated. There's also a part of the act is for CMS and CDC to work together on an outcome measure for sepsis, so that hospitals can readjust and they can see what their outcome was, what happened. And there is another part of it that's covered in the bill that would instruct CMS to introduce a pediatric sepsis measure, because as you said earlier, we have a huge number of children dying every day from sepsis. So currently it is in the Senate. We will be announcing next week for World Sepsis Day that we have additional sponsors to the bill. And so that is what is first and foremost for us right now, is to get this bill passed. We've been very frustrated that we've seen an awful lot of money go to other illnesses. Not that I have any problem with it, but we just want the same type of treatment, and we haven't been getting it. So we've been pretty active in DC, and we hope to get it through this year. That's our goal. And
we'll send out a link to the bill to make sure people have it. But right. Really, two questions for you, Orly. If people want to jump on and support the movement and passage of this bill, how would they go about doing that? And secondly, with with the uncertainty with the CDC, have you heard anything that potentially could impact negatively this legislation with the turmoil going on?
The first part is, I think if we go into slide 3, you can see how you can get on to support the act and to send it to your local representatives, or just go on our website, sepsis.org. And it's all set up on our website. We tell you who your local representatives are, and the letter is there to support it. And we have a Sepsis Families United, which was created specifically to bring our advocates to Washington, D.C. So senators and Congress people can actually hear from families and survivors, families who have lost family members and survivors. So they can hear firsthand, not just Rory's story, but there's so many stories, and various levels of illness in terms of young people and older people. And we haven't heard anything that will that would stop the CDC from being as involved as they are. Obviously, like everybody else, we are really very concerned about what's happening. We do believe, we're hopeful that this will go through. We have a lot of, we have Senator Schumer, we have Senator Collins, we have some very good support. We are speaking with Senator Cassidy. There's broad support for this. They'll always pick something out. We're expecting that. There will be fights over different things in it, but that's part of what we have to do. But sepsis needs to be recognized, and there needs to be a Sepsis Act immediately.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that this would not have widespread bipartisan support. All the data is there. It's not that complicated. And, hopefully, so I thank you for those efforts. You guys talked a lot today about what you're doing organizationally to raise awareness, why, all the different targets, whether it be professional, lay people, general public, children. But you do have some unique things that you guys are doing, with podcasts and so on and so forth. So if you could just talk about those as well as ways to increase the ability to spread the message on this horrible thing we call sepsis.
Yeah, I think we have to be creative about how we break through. This is a very tough media environment. And, I think we have to be creative and meet people where they are, whether that's by having materials available in multiple languages, like the Time Mnemonic, Greg, that you guys translated. And also, the new podcasts that we launched this year. So, podcasts are a very popular medium, and there was really nothing happening in the sepsis space. So we got some funding to launch our first season, which is focused on antimicrobial resistance, which is, a critically important issue for the treatment of sepsis patients. And we just got funding for a season 2, and we're working on a season 3. So, I think this is a popular format and another way to get through to healthcare professionals to, better educate them so that they'll be better able to diagnose and treat us.
Yeah, I think blogs are really, people are picking those up. You can listen in the car. You can, be on your walk in the afternoon. It's a different way to get info out. And Orlith, you guys have an End Sepsis blog. What's that about?
Right. Well, first, let me just say, Tom, I think that's a fantastic thing to have the podcast because I know I listen to podcasts all day, every day. So I think that's a really terrific step forward. Our blog is it's on our website. It's basically where advocacy and action and sepsis or patient safety all meet. I usually write it. We are actually going to accelerate. We're going to write more of it, but we introduce the latest news on sepsis, and we also write about families who have suffered from sepsis, and any new developments we put on our blog there. Again, we think people will. I scroll a lot too. I'm one of those, so I think people scroll and just find things to really make it interesting and bring the word, like Tom was saying, into the areas that people are actually engaging in, and that is on their computers and on their phones, and that's what we think is really important now.
It is important. And just 2 more things, because I know we're running out of time. I want to get to some Q&As. The state of Florida yesterday eliminated their mandatory vaccinations for all age groups, including kids going to school, which is kind of stunning to me under the guise of who should tell you what to do with your bodies. Well, there's other things going on at the national level doing exactly that, telling you what to do with your bodies. But you have a Get Vax campaign, which we are 100% behind in New York. Vaccinations are extremely important. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we just did a survey of U.S. adults, 2,000 U.S. adults, and only 41% said that they had received a vaccination in the past year. So this is really troublesome because if you're not vaccinated, you're more susceptible to getting infections that can cascade to sepsis, and you're also more likely to transmit whatever you may have, and in a more serious state. So we launched the Get Vaxxed campaign earlier this year, and focusing on those communities that had lower vaccination rates than the national average, and that was New Orleans, Jackson, Mississippi, and West Virginia. So that's been running, and we're going where the people are. We're at bus shelters, we're on buses, those bus ads that you see on top of the seats, out-of-home billboards, and we're hoping to get funding to do a Spanish language version of this for New York and Chicago. And, it's not the level of funding that the CDC was putting into vaccination confidence, which was close to $1 billion a year. But we're doing what we can. And, I think the more support we get, the more we can do in this realm, because vaccinations are the single most important piece of infection prevention and sepsis prevention.
Thank you. And somebody tell me what Lulu's Law is.
So Lulu's Law, another very tragic story. Lulu Haynes of Montclair, New Jersey, burst appendix, family, again, had never heard of sepsis, got to hospital too late. There was really no medical malpractice, but it was just too late. And Lulu passed away. And her dad, was sharing his story, their family's story, devastating to the family. And Mikey Sherrill, Congresswoman from New Jersey, heard about it and asked if she could be helpful. And that led to Lulu's Law, which we're advancing. And, the challenges that Orla talked about in DC are many. We're looking for $5 million to support two things. One is the creation of national sepsis registries, state level registries, similar to the cancer registries. So part of the problem with sepsis is that we don't really understand the heterogeneity of it. So when I was a kid, cancer was one thing. We have to beat cancer. I was like, okay, we'll do that, and then we'll be done with cancer. We now know cancer is 463 different things. And as a result of that understanding, we've been better able to research, diagnose, and treat. And mortality has gone down dramatically in many types of cancer. So that's one of the things we want to work with the CDC on, is to develop a similar registry so that we can better understand the heterogeneity, so we can treat it not as just a monolith, because it's not a monolith. It presents in so many different ways, which is confounding the diagnosis process. The other piece is to establish a national sepsis action plan at the federal level. And the WHO and World and UN have called for every nation to have one of these. And Canada does, Switzerland does, UK does, Australia does, the US does not. So, these are things that have to happen. This is the number one cost of hospital care in the country, and it is the number one cause of death in hospitals. And we're doing so little about it.
Thank you. And thank you both for those updates on better ways to get out. We'll do anything that we can here to continue to support that. So before we get into the audience Q&A, we're going to take a quick break. There's probably a good chance, if you're watching today's program, it's on our YouTube channel. Last year, our channel had 2.2 million views and almost 300,000 watch hours. So I thank you for doing that. But don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We have tons of content that we're uploading all the time that you can pick and choose from. So let's take a look at this.
Hi, I'm Molly Ryan, and I'm a communications intern for the New York State Office for the Aging. I am so happy to be on board with this agency, and I'm for sure learning a lot. I have recently learned about the agency's YouTube channel, which has so many resources for older adults and their caregivers. There's a reason they have millions of views. Like and subscribe today.
Thanks, Molly. Well, we have a few minutes left, so let's take some questions from the audience. If someone gets sepsis, is it more likely to happen again?
Yes. Sepsis is an immune-compromising condition, so you are more likely to get it again. Very important for the survivor community. And we've formed recently a survivor support community called Sepsis Alliance Connect, understanding that 40% require readmission within 90 days and 14,000 amputations a year. And more than half of survivors have significant ongoing psychological, mental, cognitive, executive functioning challenges. So we have about 5,000 plus already taking advantage of that community. And we're working with hospitals now to provide that information on discharge so that folks know that there are resources available. So short answer is yes. And, Muhammad Ali is an example of that. He had sepsis several times before finally succumbing to sepsis.
Thanks, Tom. Next question. Do sepsis symptoms appear different in older adults compared to other groups?
I would say yes, they are different. In the areas of temperature, where in a child, if we're comparing it to a child, they would more likely have a high temperature. In older adults, it could be lower. Then I think really probably the overall presentation might make people feel, well, the older person is just getting old or just feeling old, and that doesn't happen so much with younger particularly with children, because they will have chills and a fever. And I think that, the skin can make it different also, in that a younger adult will have a rash, mottled skin, whereas an older person will actually be more cold to touch. So I think there are subtle differences, but there are definitely differences.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out before you jump in, Tom, your first comment is ageism rearing its ugly head yet again.
Yeah. And, I think hydration is a critically important prevention component, particularly in older adults, but for all of us to be well hydrated. And I know older folks are generally reluctant to hydrate from personal experience because they don't want to have to go to the bathroom as often, which is a chore. So that's an issue. And also, mental status change is harder to read in an older adult very often. If there's dementia, early or advanced dementia happening, it's very hard to understand what the baseline was. But someone who's a caregiver who is with that person can know if it's gotten worse. And that's really important to lean into, is that mentation, change in mentation.
And again, for the audience, all of what these folks are talking about today are on the End Sepsis website and the Sepsis Alliance website. Not hard to look up, not hard to get the signs and symptoms, not hard to share this. These are things that we do at no cost to ourselves, to blast things out constantly, to keep it in front of people, because sepsis awareness should not be during one day or 1 week or 1 month of the year. It's 365, 24/7. I have heard that antibiotics are not working the way they should. Is this true? And how and what will that impact sepsis?
Yeah, we go. Orla, do you want to take that one?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, this is antimicrobial resistance, which is a real thing. And more we're seeing folks require, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 7 different antibiotic courses before they find the one that works. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're becoming more and more resistant to the antibiotics that we have. Bugs are very, very smart, and we're not developing new antimicrobials at the rate we should be. So that's a problem. The private sector is not investing in new antibiotics because there's no money in it. You only use it for a few days, unlike, something for chronic conditions. So that's a piece of the challenge. And, there are things we can do, and that includes the advanced use of diagnostics and getting more rapid diagnostics into place. So during COVID, there was a huge overuse of antimicrobials because clinicians didn't know if it was simply viral or had gone on to become a bacterial infection. So the default was to prescribe a broad spectrum antibiotic. So if rapid diagnostics were available at Rory's Hospital and they'd use them, if it were available at urgent care, we could understand if something was surely just the flu or it had progressed to sepsis, and where more antimicrobial use was appropriate. So a big problem, a growing problem, and something we can do things about.
Great, thanks, Tom. Well, that's all the time that we have today. I cannot thank Tom Heyman, President and CEO of Sepsis Alliance, Rory Staunton, founder and director of End Sepsis, the Legacy of Rory Staunton, who have dedicated literally a good portion of their lives, as we can hear today, saving lives. And you can be a part of that. This is not hard to take the resources that they've spent decades culling and pulling together and getting legislation and working with, again, providers and the community members all across the state and all across the nation. Raising awareness is the easiest tool, but it's also sometimes the hardest. And you can play a major role in that. It's there for you. We have these resources available. Help us help you or somebody that you love. Get this information out. We'll be back on September 18th, and our show is going to be National HIV/AIDS and Aging Awareness Day. And again, hope you guys had a great summer. It's great that we can kick off with such a consequential show this time. And again, thanks to Tom and Orla. And I want to thank our communication staff who make this production always amazing. Alex, Darren, and Roger. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Live with Greg is a production of the New York State Office for the Aging Communications Bureau. Please join us next time.